Another thing that you bring up in the book that I wanted to ask about is if we could spend a little bit of time on rain,
Mm.
on rain. And rain stands for recognition, acceptance, investigation, and non-identification.
This metaphor of rain comes from a Buddhist psychologist named Dr. Jack Kornfield, and he came up with this way of this method for integrating mindfulness into your daily practice. And the first one, as you mentioned, is recognition. And what we're aiming to do is to recognize the moment that's happening. What is going on around us? What recognizing that you're having mind chatter
Mm.
in that moment, right? I
Mm-hmm.
am thinking. I am thinking. As soon as you have that awareness, I am thinking, you have entered into a state of enlightenment. As soon as you have the thought, I am thinking,
Mm.
you have entered a state of enlightenment. Why? Because you are recognizing you are not the thought that you're having. You are the
Right.
observer of that thought, right? So just aware of, I'm not present right now. My mind has taken me somewhere else. Recognizing that. So when you're making love, when you're having sex, and you're realizing, oh, I'm not thinking about this moment. I'm thinking about some other moment. That's hugely important and a real step forward, I think, in the making nice with naughty process.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
other element is acceptance, right? The accepting the reality of the moment. Earlier I talked about the mindfulness is a state of non-judgmentalness,
Mm-hmm.
right? Accepting is part of that, and not arguing with reality. I wish it were different. Why couldn't we? It should be more like this. It must be like this. I have to have it this way. When you're arguing with reality, you're of course setting yourself up for more suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Acceptance isn't resignation. I want to underscore. It's just that
Mm-hmm.
this
It's just.
is the reality that I'm living in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we moved into investigate with thoughtfulness. What is happening inside of me? Earlier, we talked about the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method to bring you
Mm-hmm.
kind of closer to that process, and we used we reminded listeners of the Byron Katie
Mm-hmm.
the work, right? Um, uh, so you may just begin asking yourself questions. What most wants my attention in this moment, right? Uh, uh, if you're having sex, it's like, well, what? This may be a strange question to ask oneself, but what does my vulva want in this moment,
Right.
right?
Right.
You would not be surprised by this, but a lot of women feel so detached from their genitalia that they don't even feel like it's a part of them, right?
Hmm.
They talk about it as if it's a separate part of themselves, right? So seeing that this, questioning those thoughts of is this a separate part of me, right? What
Mm-hmm.
does my body want? What would make my body feel good in this moment? Right? So you're investigating those.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last part is, to not identify yourself with the moment. So non-identification, that this moment is not who I am, but I am the observer of this moment. So that's that
Yeah.
self as context. I am the observer. Even if I don't get an erection,
Mm-hmm.
and everything in my mind chatter now is telling me, oh, I'm less of a man, I'm a terrible lover, blah 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 blah. I'm just going to observe those thoughts rather than get sucked into it. It's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
watching a movie. When you're at the
Mm-hmm.
movie theater, you're watching a movie up on the screen. You know that you're not an actor in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it seems like when the mind starts to go crazy with all of these vivid thoughts, we tend to think of ourselves being in the movie when we're simply observers of it.
Right. Right.
That this, despite what my mind may be telling me, I am not limited to the story of my mind. To give you an example, um, our past doesn't define us. We define our past. And I talk a little bit more about this in a later chapter on trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but if I believe that my past defines me, then that will impact how I show up in
Absolutely.
relationships.
Absolutely. So interesting. So interesting.